So part two, we're going to focus here on the best practices around making those successful Enlist applications. And you know what? It starts with a program approach. It always does. And at Corteva, our portfolio of products allows you from start to finish to have a program approach and stay and keep it a Corteva acre. Enlist One, Enlist Duo, they have zero plant back restrictions. So for your burn down, they're great options. For your pre-herbicides, and we are strong advocates of pre-herbicides. In today's environment, you want to be using pre-herbicides. It's a great tool to prevent weed resistance before it starts. And at Corteva, we offer a lot of pre-herbicides. Don't let it confuse you. What we have is something that'll work for your soil types and for your rotation and for your weed spectrum. But for example, Sonic up here, that's a combination of Authority, sulfentrazone, probably the best water hemp product there is, in conjunction with First Rate, which is another broad spectrum, broadleaf soil applied herbicide. So you got two modes of action. I know growers, they're taking that Sonic and they're putting in some Ever-Pre-X. So that Ever-Pre-X gives you a third mode of action. It's a group 15, gives you grass and water hemp control. That's a belts and suspenders type approach. Belts and suspenders. We're protecting it more than one way. We're holding our pants up with belts and suspenders. We're killing our water hemp with 3 different modes of action. We're going to follow that up with Enlist, and it's either going to be with glyphosate or glufosinate. We require one of those 2 modes of action to be with us. That gives us dual mode of action. And I'm going to talk about how Enlist does the heavy lifting here, but we want that second mode of action in there. And we're advocates of both, of either Enlist One with glyphosate or Enlist One with Liberty glufosinate. They're both excellent tools, and both can work very effectively, but it has to be one or the other. So this is a photo of that from Minnesota a couple summers ago. And on the left is just glufosinate Liberty alone with Ever-Pre-X, our residual group 15. And then on the right is Enlist spray with Liberty. And you can see that dual mode of action, the clean field that you got with it, with that. And as I said earlier, it's the Enlist that's doing the heavy lifting here. And I'm going to show you this. This is a summary of university data. And it's just Enlist alone in the first 2 columns. And then it's Enlist plus glyphosate on the right. And first thing I want to show you, half rate of Enlist, 16 ounces. That's the half rate. Look at the level of weed control that people get with, growers get with that. Still pretty darn good, 80s and 90% weed control mostly, and some 70s there. This is what people have been using for burn down rates at 2,4-D. Now let's go to the full court of 2,4-D. Look how everything jumps up to green with the exception of Palmer Amaranth, probably a weed that needs 2 post applications. Finally, look at the far column when we add glyphosate to the Enlist One. Everything goes green. It adds a level of weed control regardless of what the weeds are. That's because glyphosate helps Enlist can kill weeds even if they are glyphosate resistant. Glyphosate helps Enlist kill weeds even if they're glyphosate resistant. Certainly in Iowa, we see it time and time again how the glyphosate adds to the Enlist weed control, and all our water hemp in Iowa is glyphosate resistant. You see that data down there. If you go to the glyphosate-resistant water hemp species, where it goes from 77% control in a pint to 88 at 2 pints, jumps up to 93% when we add the glyphosate. You'd see similar data with Enlist plus glufosinate here too. And folks, don't be disappointed that a 1 post trip is only in the 90-some% control range. I'm going to suggest to you that if somebody shows you something that's 100%, you might want to question some of that data. I want you to know this is real data right here. It also illustrates why we're going to use a pre-herbicide down too. So the next thing I want to focus on is weed height. And you see here a summary of some data. And let's focus on water hemp here again. We look at 2 to 4 inch water hemp, pretty easily controlled. This is with Enlist alone. And we don't recommend Enlist alone, but you can see it does an excellent job on 2 to 4 inch water hemp alone. Look what happens when those water hemps start getting bigger. Control starts dropping off very quickly. 5 to 6 inches is still on label, but 84% control is not satisfactory. You know why that is? Look at this. Look at that 2-inch water hemp on the left. It has 9 growing points. All those little buds where those leaflets connect into the stem, those are auxiliary buds. It can regrow from there. That 6-inch, 4 to 6 inch water hemp, it's got twice as many growing points, and we really need to cover those growing points to kill that weed. That's why we want you spraying small weeds and being aggressive earlier in the year with it. Vast majority of our weed problems are in the borders of our fields. That's because our borders, are surrounded by ditches and woods and areas where we don't control weeds. There's other things. Sometimes when we spray around the borders, we get some skips where our pressure is not uniform, our application rate's not uniform, and we can get more weed pressure ultimately around our borders. And for that, I'm suggesting to people that if you really want to, take your weed control to another level, maybe you make a second application of Enlist around those borders. Maybe your first one was Enlist glyphosate, maybe your second pass just around your borders, maybe your 90-foot boom pass around the edges, Enlist glufosinate. Or here's a crazier idea. Maybe instead of 30-inch rows, you double plant and you get 15-inch rows. You know what? That extra, that solid seeding, that closer to solid seeding is going to give you row closure, canopy sooner. You're going to appreciate the weed control that alone provides. Let's talk just real quickly about killing volunteer corn. I'm going to just be very blunt. Clethodim, Select Max from Valent, Clethodim, any Clethodim, it's the best there is for controlling volunteer corn when you tank mix with Enlist. Enlist does antagonize it a little bit though. Only volunteer corn and does Enlist do this to. And so we overcome that antagonism by raising the rate by 1/3. So volunteer corn, yeah, absolutely tank mix with Clethodim any day of the week, but crank that rate up maybe 1/3, even 1/2 above what it was. In Iowa, we're starting out with 10 ounces in a lot of situations. Finally, I want to conclude just a little bit on tank mixing with Enlist. It's not difficult to tank mix with Enlist, but I'm going to suggest to you, though, that if you ever have problems, it'll be because probably you're mixing too quickly and you're not giving products adequate time to agitate and go into suspension or solution. So start with that sprayer half full, put your AMS in, get it in full solution, add a second product, add more water, finally end up with your crop oil or MSO. Give yourself time and agitation between products, and you won't have any problem tank mixing with Enlist. I hope you've valued from these presentations, on Enlist best practices. We certainly want you to work with your local retailer and your local Corteva crop protection territory manager. Those are the experts in your area. With that, I wish you a great and successful planting season. Thank you.